So it finally happened. I've been a content creator here on YouTube for a little over 2 years now, and I finally got my first piece of actual negative criticism. Now, I call it actual criticism because obviously I've gotten troll comments here and there, but this was negative feedback from someone that was specific to the content that I'm creating and putting out there. Now, I like to think of myself as someone who has a pretty thick skin. I mean, I was a working actress for a decade. I'm pretty used to rejection at this point. But anytime you put yourself out there as a content creator, as a business owner, you're opening yourself up to the opinions of others, good and bad. So I wanted to talk about why people feel the need to share their negative thoughts and opinions with us. And more importantly, how can you keep going even when you get that kind of feedback? But before we dive into this, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that little notification bell so that you never miss a tutorial or upload. So there's a quote that I have loved for a really long time, and it was actually brought back to my attention a couple of years ago when I read Daring Greatly by Brené Brown, because it's the quote that basically inspired her to write that book. And just a little aside here for a second, read that book. That is one of the most inspiring and I don't know, just I love that book. So I'm gonna drop a link to it in the description so that you can go and grab a copy for yourself if you haven't read it. But the quote that I'm talking about isn't one that's super obscure. In fact, a lot of people have heard it. I see it referenced all over the place. But it's from Theodore Roosevelt, and you might know it as the man in the arena. So I'm going to actually read the whole quote because I think sometimes pieces of it get used here and there, but a little bit more of the context I think is helpful here, especially in this particular conversation. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I think it's probably obvious why I love this quote. I think it's such a great reminder that I don't need to give every opinion that I hear the same weight. When I talked about daring greatly over on the Success Through Community podcast, this was one of the things that I mentioned the most, right? There are a handful of people whose opinions really matter to me. And they are all people who are in the arena. They are all people who are in their own right working towards and putting themselves out there, typically in the same or similar field as me, right? As a business owner, as a content creator, they are making themselves vulnerable. They are taking big risks and they are facing the same victories and failures that I am. And their opinions are the ones that I take most to heart. But does that mean that other people's opinions don't get through? I mean, I wish that I could say yes, but that's not realistic. It's funny though, because I had already planned on doing this episode because, like I said at the beginning, I got that piece of feedback. And the first thing that came to mind for me was, this makes me remember that quote, that man in the arena quote. And then my husband and I were watching Young Rock. Now, I don't know if you know about the show. And the reason that I make that face and shake my head is because it is not the best show out there. It's cute. That's all I'm gonna say. It's cute, um, entertaining. It's one of those kind of mindless, entertaining things that we can watch together, and it's fun and whatever. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is a show that Dwayne Johnson is putting out there. He's starring in it, and it's kind of like this like faux documentary talking about his life and his achievements and his childhood and all of that, and it's done in like a documentary style, but it's obviously fully scripted and acted and all of that. But the reason I bring that up is because I had just decided that I was going to do this episode on this quote, And then the episode that we were watching of that show, he literally brought up the same quote. So it was a very nice affirmation for me that, yeah, this is probably a timely topic. This is something that comes up a lot, and it comes up in pop culture, and it comes up in business and all over the place. So let's just say it's part of the reason that this episode is happening right now. So, like I said at the beginning, there are kind of two different angles that I want to talk about this from. The first part of that is just why? Why do people feel the need to leave negative comments and feedback? And also, why do they feel those negative things? Why do they have those negative opinions? And I think realistically, there are probably as many reasons as there are people. But there are three that came to mind for me when I was thinking about this. Like, especially for me as a content creator and the content that I put out that's more along the Tech Savvy Academy side, the tutorials that I put out there, that is where this feedback came from in the first place. And don't even bother going and looking for it on YouTube. The feedback was about my YouTube, but it was not said on YouTube. So just saying that right there. Don't go looking for it. You're not going to find it. But there are three reasons, like I said, that are, I think, the primary reasons that people not only have these negative thoughts and opinions, but feel the need to share them. Because in most cases, they're not doing it in a constructive criticism, let me help you be better kind of way. That's what people do in private. Those are the people who actually care about you. And those are those people who end up on your little short list of people whose opinions actually matter, right? And that you are going to listen to and maybe actually make some changes because of. The people who choose to put you on blast or say it in a public forum are typically not doing it for your edification. So that's an important kind of thing to mention right out here at the beginning is I'm not saying that there can't be any validity to what they're saying. I'm just saying they're not doing it for your benefit. So why do they do it? The reasons that I'm going to give here are not in any particular order because honestly, I don't know what the number one reason is, and I don't claim to know what the number one reason is. But one of those reasons, I think, is jealousy. They may be somebody who sees you having success and making progress in an area that they wish that they were, or maybe that they wish they were even making the attempt. Maybe they wish they were in the arena, but they're too afraid to put themselves out there in that way. And so they're jealous of what they see you achieving and they are jealous of your success. And so then they have to say something negative because it makes them feel better about themselves. And like, I'm not saying that makes it easier to read or hear their opinions, but at the same time, when you remember that that's a possible place that they're coming from, it puts it all into a very different perspective. It reminds us that it's not about us at all. It's 100% about them. And when we remember that and keep that in mind, while it doesn't necessarily make it sting any less, it does help us to really put that comment or that feedback in perspective and reminds us that, this isn't really about me. I'm just going to kind of move on from that. Another reason that I feel that people make those comments versus simply keeping their opinion to themselves, because let's be honest, we all have negative thoughts and opinions when we see other people's content, but it's pretty rare, at least for me, that I'm going to go so far as to share it because it's not going to do any good. It's not, like I said, there to help the person. It's just my negative reaction. Do I really need to share it? Well, I think that sometimes people do feel the need to share it, but again, not for your benefit. They're doing it because they're attention seeking. They simply want other people to stop paying attention to you, to the content creator, and start paying attention to them. And I honestly think that even if the attention that they get is not positive, if people completely disagree with them and even start going off on them, it still gives them the attention that they were craving. And so it's a win in their book. And if that's what they're going for, they might not even believe the negative opinion or the negative comment that they said. They're simply saying it because they are trying to be contradictory or controversial and get that attention. So if that is their motivation, then you really shouldn't care what they were saying because it's not relevant at all. I know that we can't really ever know what the reason is why somebody makes that comment. We can't say that it's because of jealousy or attention seeking. And so, is it putting your head in the sand to just assume that it must be that and that it can't actually be true? I mean, again, it's not really about whether or not their feedback is true. It's about whether you're going to let it get to you or let it change the way that you're doing what you're doing. And this brings me to the third reason that I personally think people share that negative feedback that they have. Honestly, I think it's because those people aren't actually your intended audience. And in my personal situation, that's actually where I think this came from. The comment that the person made gives me the impression that they're not really who I'm talking to. When I create my content, when I create especially my tutorials, I'm speaking to a very specific type of person. I'm speaking to business owners. I'm speaking to people who don't feel super comfortable and confident in the tech in their business. And so, yeah, I would consider them more beginners and intermediate. And honestly, for me personally, when I get to the more advanced tutorials and things like that, I tend to put those inside the Tech Savvy Academy because it's been my experience that the people who are around me who are looking for that kind of in-depth training are actually inside the academy. So what I put out here in for public consumption tends to be a lot more basic, a lot more for beginners on purpose. It's meant to be more simple and to help my viewers see that technology doesn't have to be scary. It can be made simple, right? So I think this person probably is more advanced at what they're doing in technology and specifically in Trello, because obviously like 90% of my tutorials are about Trello. So yeah, what I'm talking about is probably too basic for them. It's not what they're looking for. So, assuming that that's the case, it totally helps me understand why they gave the feedback that they did. But let's just talk really quick about what, regardless of the reason, regardless of the motivation of the person who is giving that negative feedback in whatever form, what do you do with it? As a content creator, as a business owner, how do you react to negativity and somebody not liking what you're doing? Now, I'm not trying to say I have all the answers here. I certainly don't. But there are a couple of things that have helped me over the years as I've dealt with negative feedback in other areas of my life and that obviously still apply here in the business and content creation world as well. So I thought I would just share those with you guys and hopefully it helps you out if you find yourself in a similar situation. So the first thing that I do when I get some sort of negative feedback is I look for, is there any truth in what they're saying? I mentioned earlier that I have that very, very short list of people whose opinions get the most weight with me, but that doesn't mean that I just completely ignore everyone else's opinions. But I do look at their opinion and their feedback with a little bit of, I guess, that grain of salt. Is there any truth to what they're saying? Putting to the side whether or not this person is in the arena or not, is what they're saying grounded in anything? Could I do whatever it is that they're giving negative feedback about in a different or better way? Can I improve in that? Are other people giving similar negative feedback about it, or are other people saying the exact opposite? It's important to look at those things and kind of weigh them in reality and say, well, look, maybe regardless of how they meant it or their motivation, maybe this can make me better. So that's the first thing that I look at. I don't dwell on that. I look at it to see, is there any truth to this? And if there is, then I will go down a certain path. If I don't see any truth in it, or I don't see any truth that's relevant to me, then that's one sign that I can put it aside and put it out of my mind. The second thing would be for every piece of negative feedback that I get, that you get in your business, you probably get 5 to 10 positive comments or opinions or pieces of feedback coming at you. So focus on those things because realistically, those are probably more often coming from people who are your intended audience. Those people are more likely in the correct season or coming from the background and experience that is more relevant to the content that you're creating and putting out there or the products that you're selling or whatever it might be. Their positive feedback and opinions are worth so much more to you and are more worthy of your attention and focus than those pieces of negative feedback that you're always going to get from time to time. And the last thing that has always helped me, and I know will help you, is that I surround myself with supportive community, specifically like-minded business owners, content creators, people who are in the arena who can give me honest feedback, whose opinions I know are going to be beneficial and said to me in love and honest, right? They're going to be those people who I can go to and say, so and so said this, on YouTube or wherever. Is that true? Like, am I missing something? Could I be doing that better? Those people's opinions and their supportive feedback is so helpful when it comes to situations like this. But even more important is that supportive community is going to have your back. In this particular situation, and again, I'm not going to get into specifics here. I decided not to engage with this comment because I didn't see any good coming out of it. And honestly, I saw it just taking me down a rabbit hole of getting frustrated and discouraged and upset, which I could already tell from the beginning wasn't going to do me any good. It wasn't going to bring me to a place of improving in my business. But I got to shout out an awesome friend and fellow Trello creator, Brittany Joyner. I'm going to tag her in the description here so that she sees this video because she saw this comment and she stepped up and had my back. And I think that's super awesome. Surrounding yourself with people like that who are going to see somebody saying something negative about you and step up and say, wait a minute, wait a minute. You don't know anything about this person that you're talking about. I do. So let me tell you what is really going on, or let me tell you what this person's really about. That was like the most amazing feeling for me, is knowing that I'm surrounding myself with the right kind of people. And I would hope that I would be that same kind of person to speak up and say something if she or anyone else in my community, in my circle, needed that same type of support. But the question I want to ask you today is this. When you get negative feedback or opinions in your business, how do you handle them? Let me know in the comments. I hope you liked that video, and more importantly, that you found it helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with a fellow solopreneur. And make sure you check out the description for links to how we can connect and maybe even work together.